Welcome to your sleep story. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Whatever this day was, however long it felt, however much it carried, it is behind you now, completely behind you. You made it through, and that is everything. So let's begin. Before I take you anywhere tonight, I want to count you down from 10 to 1. And as I count, I want you to allow yourself to sink just a little deeper into wherever you are right now. Feel the weight of your body. Feel what is beneath you, holding you. And with each number, just let go a little more. 10, allow your eyes to close. Gently, completely. There is nothing you need to see right now. 9, feel your shoulders and let them drop as far as they want to go. 8, a slow breath in through the nose. 7, and all the way out. 6, your hands, feel them opening. Whatever you've been holding today, you can put it down now. 5, your jaw is soft. Your face is soft. 4, your legs are heavy, warm. 3, you're drifting, not asleep yet, but moving that way. 2, the day is behind you, completely and entirely behind you. 1, and now, tonight's sleep story, the relaxation. Before we go anywhere, I want to stay here with you for a moment. Just here, just now, because this moment, this exact moment right now, where you are lying in the quiet, deserves a little attention, a little kindness. Take a breath in for me, from the very bottom of the belly. Good, and let it go. And as you breathe out, I want you to imagine that everything you were carrying today, every worry, every unfinished thought, every heavy thing is just leaving with that breath, just drifting away. You don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to be anything other than exactly what you are right now. A person who deserves rest, a person who deserves sleep, because you do, you really do. Whatever happened today, however hard it felt, however much it carried, you made it through. You are here, and that is enough. That is more than enough. You are safe, and you are here. Bring your awareness gently to your feet now. Just notice them and allow them to soften. The toes uncurling, the arches releasing. All the small held tension of the day simply letting go. Let that softness travel upward, through the calves, through the knees, the thighs. All of it warm, all of it heavy, all of it resting now. Your lower back, your hips. Allow yourself to feel the surface beneath you taking your weight completely, fully. You don't have to hold yourself up anymore. The earth has you. The mountain has you. The belly soft. The chest soft. The heart beating steadily as it always has, as it always will. Your shoulders dropping, your arms heavy and warm, your hands open and still, the neck long and loose, and your face, let the jaw go. Let the forehead smooth. Let the eyes be completely still behind their lids. There you are, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, completely soft, completely warm, completely at rest. You've done beautifully. Now, let me take you somewhere high in the Andes, where the air is thin and clean and smells of eucalyptus smoke and wet earth, where a small village of adobe houses sits in a fold of the mountains beneath a sky already filling with stars, and an old woman sits on a low stone step outside her door in the evening, a half-finished weaving across her knees, listening to the wind move down from the high pastures and the particular, settling quiet of a place that has always known exactly what it is. Come with me. The road up. Imagine the road climbing. Not a wide road, a narrow, switchbacking track of packed earth and stone, the kind that connects the small villages of the high Andes to the larger towns below, the kind that has been walked in one form or another for far longer than any paved version of it has existed. The village tonight sits high in the Peruvian Andes, somewhere in the folded, terraced country above the sacred valley, at an altitude where the air holds noticeably less oxygen than the lowlands, where newcomers grow breathless on slopes, the local children run up without thought, where the sky, in compensation, seems to sit closer and larger and more entirely present than it does almost anywhere else on earth. Below, in the valley, are the larger towns, Pisac with its market, Urubamba spread along its river, Ollantaytambo with its old Inca walls still holding up newer buildings. Cusco itself, the old Inca capital, sits within a few hours' travel, its cathedral bells audible in memory, if not in fact to anyone who has lived there. Tonight's village is smaller than any of these, a cluster of perhaps 40 households, its adobe walls the same warm ochre brown as the surrounding earth, its narrow lanes unpaved, its central plaza barely large enough to hold the modest stone church, and the single ancient eucalyptus tree that shades it. The road climbs past terraced fields, Andines, stepped into the mountainside centuries ago by hands whose descendants still farm the same terraces, still growing the same varieties of potato and quinoa and maize that have grown here since long before any surveyor thought to draw a border across this particular fold of mountain. The light is failing as the road nears the village, the peaks above snow-capped, some of them, even this far into the dry season, their white catching the last orange of the sun long after the valley floor has gone to shadow, smoke rising from a dozen chimneys, thin and blue against the darkening ridge. The village receives you. The plaza, small, genuinely small, a rectangle of packed earth, its edges worn smooth by generations of feet, bordered by low stone walls, and the whitewashed, blue-doored front of the small church, its single bell tower simple and square against the sky. Beside the church, the eucalyptus tree, tall, silver-barked, planted perhaps 80 years ago by someone whose name the current villagers no longer remember with certainty, its leaves giving off, whenever the evening wind moves through them, a clean, medicinal fragrance that mixes, in the plaza's particular evening air, wood smoke and the green smell of alfalfa cut earlier in the day. A few benches, stone and simple, worn into a particular smoothness by decades of the same few dozen people, sitting in the same few dozen places to talk in the evening. A water tap communal, its metal handle worn bright by hands, dripping very slightly. The sound of that drip, one of the plaza's most constant and least noticed features. And around the plaza's edges, a handful of small shop fronts, a tienda selling little more than crackers and soda and candles, its shelves half empty by evening, its owner, an unhurried woman in her 50s, already closing the wooden shutters for the night. The smell of the plaza this evening, wood smoke first from every chimney at once, the particular scent of eucalyptus, and in some households, the dried dung of llamas and alpacas, burned for fuel in a tradition as old as keeping the animals themselves. A fuel that burns slow and warm and gives off almost no unpleasant smell at all once you have lived alongside it long enough to stop noticing it as anything but simply the smell of evening. Beneath the wood smoke, the cold, mineral cleanness of high mountain air itself, thin and sharp in a way that lowland air never quite manages, carrying with it, faintly, the green smell of potato plants and the sweeter smell of the alfalfa fields just beyond the village's edge, and threading through both something herbal, munya, the wild mountain mint that grows along every field boundary and footpath at this altitude, crushed underfoot by the day's traffic and releasing. In return, its sharp, sweet, faintly medicinal scent into the cooling evening air. You walk from the plaza, up the single lane that climbs toward the older houses at the village's upper edge, where the woman who will host you tonight has lived her entire long life. The house, a single lane, adobe walls, the color of the earth they were built from, some of them recently replastered and pale, others older and weathered to a deeper, more textured brown, corrugated tin roofs on the newer houses, red clay tile on the oldest ones, the tile itself handmade decades ago in a kiln that no longer operates, each tile subtly different from its neighbors in the way that only handmade things ever are. Doorways painted blue, some of them, in a tradition whose precise origin nobody in the village can explain with certainty, but that everyone continues without particularly questioning. The way traditions of this kind so often persist, not from active belief in their original meaning, but from the simple, accumulated rightness of a thing that has always been done this way. Guinea pigs, kai moving in soft, constant rustling groups along the base of several kitchen walls, kept loose in the corner of the cooking room in the old way, their small, warm bodies, and their soft, continuous chirruping, one of the most constant, least remarked upon sounds of any traditional Andean kitchen in the evening. A dog somewhere further up the lane, giving voice once at a passing shadow, then falling quiet, and above the lane, where it curves and climbs toward the village's uppermost houses. A house older than most of the others, visible from below. Its walls thick adobe, its single small window shuttered against the evening cold. A thread of wood smoke rising steadily from its chimney into the darkening sky. A single light, not electric, or not only electric, but the warmer, more particular light of a kerosene lamp set in the kitchen window, visible from some distance down the lane. The first breath, the house door, when you push it open at the neighbor's quiet invitation. The village's small, tightly woven community, practicing a hospitality that asks for very little in the way of prior acquaintance. Only the simple recognition of someone known, or vouched for by someone known, opens onto a smell that belongs immediately and entirely to this place and to nowhere else. Wood smoke first, the kitchen's low hearth, built into the corner of the room from the same adobe as the walls, burning a slow, careful fire of eucalyptus branches and a little dried dung. The two fuels together, giving off a particular, layered smoke, sharp and clean from the eucalyptus, warmer and slower from the dung, that has settled over the decades into the very grain of the room's blackened rafters. Beneath the wood smoke, potatoes, boiling somewhere on the hearth, in a blackened pot that has boiled potatoes on the same hearth for longer than anyone currently living can specifically remember. The Andes being, after all, the original home of the potato, this single mountain region having given rise, across many thousands of years of careful, patient cultivation, to several thousand distinct varieties, more than exist almost anywhere else on Earth, each one adapted to its own particular altitude and soil and frost tolerance, each one carrying its own name and its own particular use in the kitchen. Coca leaves, dried, in a small woven pouch on the shelf near the hearth, chewed here, and brewed as tea, not as any illicit substance, but simply as the oldest and most ordinary remedy this altitude has ever produced, taken against the thinness of the air and the tiredness of a long day's work on the terraces, offered to any guest almost before anything else is offered. And beneath all of this, the walls themselves, thick adobe, sun-dried brick, holding within their mass the accumulated warmth of every fire this kitchen has ever burned, the particular, deep, mineral patience of a house that has stood in this exact spot, rebuilt and repatched across generations, but never truly replaced for longer than any single family's memory can precisely account for. You sit on a low wooden stool near the hearth. A cup of coca tea appears in front of you, poured without much ceremony, because in this house, when someone sits by the fire, tea appears. It always has. Doña Euarlae. She is 79 years old. Her name is Doña Orlaya. She was born in this house, in the small back room just off the kitchen, 79 years ago. The third of 6 children of a family whose name has belonged to this particular terrace of mountainside for at least 5 generations, possibly more. The old parish records, kept in the nearest town are incomplete in the way that rural records so often are. Gaps opening wherever a priest was absent, or a fire took a page, or simply where nobody thought, at the time, that the recording would ever matter to anyone. She has left the village only a handful of times in her life. Once as a young woman to Cusco, for a market too large and too specific to be held anywhere closer. Once in her 40s to Lima, for medical treatment the village's own small health post could not provide. Both times, she returned as soon as the practical circumstances allowed, not from any dramatic resistance to the wider world, but simply because this particular fold of mountain, and this particular house within it, and the particular quality of light and cold and altitude that this specific place produces, was where she was from in a way that made everywhere else feel not unwelcoming exactly, but simply and plainly elsewhere. She has spent her life here. She does not consider this a small life. Her husband, Mariano, a farmer of potatoes and a keeper of a small flock of alpacas, died 9 years ago. Of an illness the village's health post caught too late to properly treat. Her children are scattered now, one still farming the family's terraces nearby, one married into a village 2 valleys over, one in Cusco working in a hotel that serves the tourists who come for the ruins and the mountains, one in Lima, where the letters come from less often than Doña Orlaya would like, though she never quite says so. She lives largely alone in the house now, her days organized around the rhythms that have organized them for as long as she can clearly remember. The animals, the small kitchen garden, the loom set up in the corner of the front room, the twice-weekly walk down to the village's tiny market, where the same handful of women have traded the same handful of goods and the same handful of pieces of news for as long as any of them can recall. She is sitting now on her low stool by the hearth, a cup of the same coca tea in her own weathered hands, a half-finished weaving spread across her knees, looking into the fire with the particular, unhurried attention of someone who has looked into this exact fire, or one very like it, on several thousand similar evenings. The kitchen, low ceiling, blackened rafters, dark with generations of hearth smoke, hung with a few bundles of drying herbs and a braid or two of seed corn, saved each year from the best of the harvest, and hung above the fire to dry and cure for next season's planting. The hearth itself, a simple raised platform of adobe and stone in the corner of the room, 3 blackened cooking pots arranged upon it, one holding potatoes, one holding a thin, fragrant soup of quinoa and vegetables from the garden. The fire beneath them fed slowly and without waste. Each stick of eucalyptus, added only as the last is nearly spent. A low wooden table, its surface worn pale in places by decades of hands and the preparation of meals. A few low stools mismatched, added across various years, as older ones finally gave way. Each one now as familiar in its own particular wobble as any of the others. Along one wall, a simple shelf holding a small collection of enamel cups and plates, a few of them chipped, a battered tin kettle, and a small, carefully kept photograph in a plain wooden frame. Doña Orlaya and Mariano, considerably younger, standing outside this same door on their wedding day, both of them dressed in the elaborate, brightly woven traditional clothing of the region, both of them looking, in the way old photographs so often capture, entirely and simply happy. In the corner nearest the hearth, the guinea pigs move in their soft, constant rustle. A dozen or more of them, kept for both company and, on special occasions, for food, in a tradition that predates the Spanish arrival in these mountains by a very long span of time indeed. And somewhere beneath the kitchen's other sounds, a small transistor radio, its volume low, playing Hueno music, the particular, plaintive, pentatonic Andean music tradition, its melodies carried by charango and quina flute, its lyrics, when there are lyrics, very often in Quechua, the language that predates Spanish in these mountains, and that Doña Orlaya still speaks more comfortably, and more often than she speaks Spanish at all. The Hueno plays, very softly. Doña Orlaya listens, or doesn't listen with equal ease. It is simply there, the way the fire's small sounds are simply there, a continuous, familiar presence in the room's low, warm quiet, the sound of the village, 8 evening. Let me tell you specifically about the sounds this village makes as the evening deepens. The wind first and always. At this altitude, on this particular shoulder of mountain, the wind is rarely entirely still. It rises in the late afternoon as the sun-warmed air of the valley begins to cool and sink, moving down from the high pastures above the village in long, steady gusts that carry, this evening, the cold, clean smell of the puna, the high open grassland where the alpacas graze, and beneath that, faintly, the mineral smell of the snow line not so very far above. The bell, a single bell in the church's small tower, rung this evening, as it is rung most evenings, by the sacristan, an elderly man, a near contemporary of Doña Orlaya's, who has rung this same bell at this same hour for so many decades that the villagers say they could tell the time by it more reliably than by any clock. Its tone, a particular, worn bronze note that carries easily across the thin mountain air to every house in the village at once. A dog barking twice somewhere below, then falling silent. An alpaca somewhere in the corral behind a neighboring house, giving its soft, humming call, not quite a bleat, not quite anything else, a sound distinctly its own. One of the quietest and gentlest sounds any domesticated animal produces anywhere. Children's voices, briefly, from a lane further down, calling some ordinary evening thing to each other before being called inside by a mother's voice, and then quiet. And from inside Doña Orlaya's kitchen, the Hueno, very soft, and the small, steady tick and settle of the hearth fire. and the occasional soft chirrup of the guinea pigs, and the particular small sound of a woman entirely at home in her own kitchen setting down her cup. The garden just outside the kitchen door, visible now only as shapes against the evening dark. Doña Orlaya's small garden terraces step down the slope behind the house. In daylight, they would show you a dense, careful planting. Several varieties of potato, planted separately and remembered by name, oca and mashuatu. The smaller, sweeter Andean tubers that most of the outside world has never heard of, and that this region has cultivated for thousands of years. Quinoa, its seed heads heavy and reddish gold at this point in the season, standing in neat rows along the terrace's upper edge. A few rows of broad beans and a scatter of the wild muña mint that Doña Orlaya neither planted nor particularly discourages, since it keeps certain insects away from the potatoes, and besides, makes a pleasant tea. And flowers, not many and not especially tended, but present. A few geraniums in a chipped tin can by the door, and along the low stone wall that borders the lowest terrace, a modest planting of the region's own wild lupins, their blue spikes closed now for the night. Beyond the garden, the corral, where 2 alpacas and a llama stand together in the deepening dark, their thick fleece, the alpaca's finer, the llama's coarser, each valued for its own particular use. Already gathering the first faint moisture of the evening's coming cold, the llama, in particular, is the elder of the group, kept now mostly for company, and for its usefulness in carrying loads on the rare occasions Doña Orlaya's son takes goods to the market in the valley below. Though in earlier generations, these same animals carried, along these same mountain paths, the greater part of everything this region ever needed to move from one place to another. The weaving on Doña Orlaya's knees this evening, a half-finished weaving, a backstrap loom, the oldest and simplest kind, one end tied to a post set into the kitchen wall, the other end tensioned by a strap around her own lower back, her body itself forming part of the loom structure, in a technique that has been practiced in these mountains, essentially unchanged, since long before the Inca Empire that briefly organized so much of this region ever existed. The wool is alpaca, spun by her own hand from her own animal's fleece, dyed with the traditional plant and mineral dyes of the region. Cochineal, the small insect that lives on the local cactus and yields, when properly prepared, a deep and remarkably fast red. Certain local barks and leaves for the yellows and greens. Indigo, traded up from the coast, for the deep, particular blue. The pattern taking shape beneath her hands is one she learned from her own mother, who learned it from hers. A specific geometric design, a row of stepped diamonds representing, in the old symbolic language, these weavings still quietly carry the mountains themselves, the Apis, the great peaks that this whole region has understood, since long before any outside religion arrived here, to be living, watchful, essentially sacred presences. She works without looking down very often, her fingers finding the pattern by a memory held more in the hands than in the conscious mind. The particular, repetitive click and pull of the shuttle passing through the warp threads, one of the most constant sounds of any evening spent in her company. This particular weaving is intended for her granddaughter in Cusco, who will wear it, if all goes as planned, at her own wedding in the coming year. Doña Orlaya will not, in all likelihood, finish it by tomorrow or the day after, but she is not in any particular hurry. It will be finished when it is finished, in the same unhurried way that most things in this village have always eventually been finished. The apis above the village, in every direction, the mountains stand, not simply as geography, in the way Doña Orlaya and her neighbors understand them, but as apis, a Quechua word that does not translate cleanly into any single English concept, referring to the great peaks as living, personal, essentially watchful beings, each with its own name, its own particular temperament, its own long-standing relationship with the human communities settled on its lower slopes. The peak that watches most directly over this village is called, in the local tongue, a name that means, roughly, the one who guards the water, its snowfields, even now, in the dry season, feeding the small stream that runs below the village, and that supplies, eventually, every one of the irrigation channels that keep the terraced fields productive across a growing season, shaped as much by altitude as by any calendar. Offerings are still made to this mountain at certain times of year in a practice, the despacho, a careful ritual bundling of coca leaves and small symbolic items, burned or buried as a gift to the earth and the mountains together, that exists now alongside, rather than instead of, the Catholic faith the village's small church represents. The two traditions having settled across nearly 5 centuries of coexistence into a working arrangement that most villagers experience not as contradiction, but simply as the full and complete range of how one properly maintains a relationship with a world that is, after all, alive in more ways than the modern outside world often allows for. Doña Orlaya herself does not consider these two ways of understanding the world to be in any particular tension. The mountain is the mountain. It has always watched over this village. It will go on doing so. The neighbors visit, a knock soft at the kitchen door, and a familiar voice calling out before it is even properly opened. Doña Justina, a neighbor and near contemporary, widowed some years before Doña Orlaya herself, arrives most evenings around this hour, a small woven bag over her shoulder, a reason for the visit that is always slight and always, in truth, beside the point. Tonight the reason is a handful of dried herbs, munya, and a little chamomile gathered from the edge of her own garden, offered and accepted with the unhurried, wordless ease of two people who who have been exchanging small, useful things across a shared lifetime. She settles onto the second low stool without particularly being asked, her own knees creaking faintly in the way both women's knees now creak, and accepts, in turn, a cup of the same coca tea that has been offered to every visitor to this kitchen for as long as either of them can remember. The two women talk, not urgently, and not about anything of any particular consequence. The weather building somewhere to the east, a grandchild's progress at the school in the valley, a cousin's cow that has gone missing from its usual pasture and been found, eventually, exactly where it always eventually is found. Their Quechua moves easily between the two of them, unhurried, occasionally dropping a Spanish word, where the Spanish word simply happens to arrive first. The two languages sitting together in their conversation, the way the two faiths sit together in the village's wider life, not in competition, simply as the full range of what is available to say a thing properly. Doña Justina asks after the weaving on the loom, and Doña Orlaya shows her the step diamond pattern taking shape, and the two of them discuss, briefly, and with real expertise, a small technical question about the dye lot of a particular red, the cochineal having come out very slightly different in tone from the batch used the previous month. This is not a remarkable conversation. It is not meant to be. It is simply what two old friends who have lived their entire lives within a few hundred meters of each other say to each other on an ordinary evening, the saying of it mattering rather less than the fact of the two of them sitting together by the same fire as they have sat together several thousand times before. After perhaps half an hour, Doña Justina rises, gathers her bag, and steps back out into the cooling evening lane, calling a last unhurried word over her shoulder before the door closes behind her. The kitchen returns to its earlier quiet. Doña Orlaya sits a moment longer with her tea before turning, finally, to the evening meal. The evening meal. The soup is ready before the last of the light entirely leaves the sky. Quinoa, the ancient grain that this same region has cultivated across an altitude range too extreme for almost any other staple crop, simmered slowly with a little of the garden's onion and potato, and a handful of dried herbs from the shelf above the hearth, a small piece of dried alpaca meat, charqui, prepared by a method of freeze-drying that predates any modern refrigeration by thousands of years. The high-altitude nights here regularly cold enough, even outside the coldest months, to freeze meat solid, the daytime sun then drawing the moisture back out across several cycles until what remains keeps, essentially unrefrigerated, for months at a time. Potatoes, of course, boiled whole in their skins, several different varieties in the same pot, each one with its own particular texture and flavor that Doña Orlaya could identify blind by feel alone, without the smallest hesitation. A little ricotta chili, grown in a pot by the doorway, adding its particular bright heat to whatever it touches. She eats slowly, without hurry, the meal itself less an event than a continuation of the evening's general unhurried rhythm. The fire, the wool, the wind outside, the meal, all part of the same single, extended, entirely ordinary evening that this house has hosted in one form or another for longer than any specific memory can precisely account for. A neighbor's voice calls a greeting from the lane outside. Doña Orlaya calls back, unhurried, something about the weather, something about the potatoes, the brief, easy exchange of two people who have exchanged some version of this same brief conversation several thousand times across a shared lifetime in the same small place. The market day memory. Tomorrow is not market day. That falls, in this village, twice weekly. And tonight is not one of the evenings before it. But Doña Orlaya's mind drifts there anyway, unbidden. The way minds drift toward familiar and comfortable things in the quiet stretch of an evening. She remembers, without particular effort, the market as it has always been held in the small plaza itself. A scatter of blankets spread on the ground, each one holding a particular vendor's goods. Potatoes from one family's terraces, quinoa from another's. A woman from 2 villages over who brings salt carried up from the flats near Mara's, where salt has been harvested from mineral springs in the same terraced pools since long before any written history of this region begins. Bartering still happens alongside the ordinary exchange of the small local currency. A sack of potatoes for a length of woven cloth, a portion of quinoa for a few hours' help with a neighbor's roof. The older economy persisting quietly alongside the newer one, in the unhurried way that old and new so often persist together in a place like this. She remembers her own mother at this same market decades ago, and her grandmother before that. The particular continuity of it, the same plaza, the same rough arrangement of blankets, the same handful of families whose names, if not always whose specific faces, have been trading in this exact spot for as long as anyone can specifically account for. She will go, as she always does, the day after tomorrow. For now, the memory of it is enough. The festival memory. Doña Orlaya's mind, unhurried this evening, drifts also toward the festivals. Not anyone in particular, but the general, accumulated memory of them. The way a life lived in one place for long enough eventually files its festivals together into a single, warm, recurring impression. Inti Raymi, the great Inca festival of the winter sun, celebrated most visibly now in Cusco itself, with its elaborate reenactments performed for crowds of visitors, but marked too more quietly and more locally, in villages like this one, with a smaller gathering at the plaza, a shared meal, an acknowledgement of the solstice and the sun's slow promised return toward longer days. Coiler Riddy, the pilgrimage to the high glacier some distance from here, undertaken by dancers and pilgrims from villages across this whole region, climbing through the night to arrive, by dawn, at a sanctuary set almost against the ice itself. A festival that blends, without any apparent contradiction, the veneration of a Christian image with a far older reverence for the mountain and the glacier it is built beside. Doña Orlaya made this pilgrimage herself several times as a younger woman and remembers still with unusual clarity the particular cold of that high-altitude night climb, the sound of several hundred voices and several dozen small brass bands, all moving upward together in the dark, and the specific, overwhelming light of the sunrise arriving, finally, across the glacier's face. She does not make the climb anymore. Her knees, she says, have retired from glaciers, though her heart, she adds, has not. Her son still goes most years and brings back each time some small account of it for her. How the ice has visibly retreated, even within his own remembered lifetime, a little further up the mountain each year, a fact the pilgrims themselves have watched and quietly noted, and in their own way grieved across each of the last several decades. Carnival, too, in its season, brings its own particular noise and color to the village. Water thrown in play between neighbors, a shared meal, dancing in the plaza to the same Hueno rhythms that play more quietly from Doña Orlaya's kitchen radio on an ordinary evening like this one, and the smaller, more local festival of the village's own patron saint in August, when every family that has ever left contrives, if at all possible, to return for at least the day. The plaza filling, briefly, with faces that spend most of the year in Cusco or Lima, or further still, the whole village restored for a few crowded hours to something closer to its fuller, earlier self. She thinks of these evenings the way she thinks of most things now, not with any particular longing, but with the settled, contented warmth of someone who has had, across a long life, rather more good ordinary days than difficult ones, and who has learned, somewhere along the way, to hold the good ones lightly rather than anxiously, trusting that more of them, in their own season, will come again. The letter from Lima, in the small wooden chest beside her bed, beneath a folded shawl and a few other kept things, there is a letter from her daughter, Rosa, who has lived in Lima for 11 years now, working in the household of a family in one of the city's wealthier districts. Rosa telephones sometimes when the village's single, often unreliable signal permits it. But she writes as well, longer and more carefully than any phone call allows, in a hand Doña Orlaya has known since it was a child's uncertain scrawl, and that has become, across the years, entirely her own. The letter arrived some weeks ago, brought up from the valley by a cousin traveling this way, and Doña Orlaya has read it several times since, once quickly, for the plain facts of it, and several times more slowly in the evenings by the hearth, for whatever lies beneath the plain facts, the particular tone and rhythm of her daughter's sentences carrying, in themselves, a kind of presence that the occasional broken phone call does not quite manage. Rosa is well. She is saving toward a visit home, perhaps for the coming Inti Raymi festival, when the whole region turns its attention for a few days toward the old Inca celebration of the winter solstice sun. She does not say, in so many words, that she misses the mountains, but something in the letter's unhurried patience, its careful attention to small details of home. She asks after the alpacas, the garden, whether the old dog is still living, says a version of it anyway. Doña Orlaya will write back this week in her own careful hand, as she always does, the health post and the doctor, once a month, more or less, depending on the roads and the weather. A doctor comes up from the district town to spend 2 days at the village's small health post, a single-room concrete building near the school that handles what it can and refers onward to the hospital in Cusco, whatever it cannot. Doña Orlaya has known this particular doctor, a patient, unhurried man in his middle years, for some 6 or 7 years now, since the previous one moved on to a posting nearer the coast, and the relationship has developed across these periodic visits, the particular warmth that medical relationships in small, remote communities so often develop, professional on one side, grateful on the other, but also simply familiar, the doctor having come to know, across these visits, enough of Doña Orlaya's history and character that the appointments carry a note of real personal regard alongside their clinical purpose. She is, for her age, in reasonably good health, a fact she attributes, when asked, to a life spent largely outdoors at this altitude, eating what her own terraces and her own animals provide, walking the steep lanes of this village every day for 79 years, and never having had any particular reason for the sustained, corrosive kind of worry that she understands from Rosa's occasional descriptions city life can produce. She does not entirely believe this explanation herself. She suspects some portion of what she is has simply been given to her by the altitude and the mountain, and whatever else a life spent this high and this rooted quietly provides. But the explanation, even if incomplete, is not inaccurate. The son who stayed, of Doña Orlaya's 4 children, only one, her second son, Fortunato, still farms the family's own terraces here in the village, though he lives now with his wife and 2 young children in a somewhat newer house a short distance down the lane, closer to the plaza. He came by earlier in the afternoon, as he does most days, to check the irrigation channel that feeds the lowest of his mother's potato terraces. A small stone-lined channel that requires, every so often, a little clearing of silt and leaves to keep the water moving properly toward the plants that need it. He is a quiet man, in his early 50s now, his hands permanently marked by decades of the same work his father did before him, his Quechua as natural to him as his Spanish, his relationship to the land around this village, a matter of such deep, unreflective familiarity that he could probably not entirely explain it if asked, any more than a person can easily explain their relationship to their own native language. He worries, sometimes aloud to his mother, about the rains, less reliable than they once were, he says, arriving later some years and harder than they used to. The old patterns his own father read so confidently in the stars, and the mountain's moods no longer holding quite as firmly as they once did. Doña Orlaya listens to these worries without dismissing them, but also without any great alarm, having lived long enough to have weathered several previous decades that each, in their own time, seemed unusually difficult. And having noticed, across that same long stretch of time, that the mountain and the people beneath it have, so far, always found some way of adjusting to whatever changes the years brought. Fortunato will inherit, eventually, the greater part of these terraces, and after him, in all likelihood, one of his own children, the same long, unbroken thread of cultivation that has run through this particular family, on this particular mountainside, for longer than any specific record can precisely confirm. Tonight, he simply checked the channel, exchanged a few unhurried words with his mother at the garden's edge, and went back down the lane to his own house and his own family's evening meal. The whole exchange lasting perhaps 10 minutes, and containing, within those 10 minutes, most of what actually needs to be said between a mother and a son who see each other, in some capacity, nearly every day of their lives. The high pasture above the village, higher than the terraced fields, higher even than the last scattered stands of native cunha trees that manage to survive at this altitude. The land opens into the puna, the high, wind-scoured grassland that extends, in places, for many miles before finally giving way to permanent snow. It is here that the village's alpacas and llamas spend the greater part of the year, tended in rotation by whichever family's turn it currently is, the animals moving slowly across the tough, wiry iku grass that is really the only vegetation capable of thriving at this altitude, cropping it low and leaving it, in their own unhurried way, to recover before the herd returns. Doña Orlaya's grandson, Fortunato's eldest boy, spent much of the day up there today, as he does several days most weeks, a small, capable figure against the enormous scale of the open grassland, a sling and a small bag of coca leaves, and bred his only real equipment, a dog for company, and an entire afternoon of sky and wind and grazing animals, his entire immediate world. He will have seen today, almost certainly, a condor somewhere overhead, riding the thermals that rise from the sun-warmed rock faces along the puna's edges, a bird whose wingspan can exceed 3 meters, whose presence in the old Andean symbolic order represents the upper world, the realm of the apis and the sky, exactly as the puma represents the middle world of ordinary human life, and the serpent the lower world of roots and ancestors and water. He will have seen, too, very likely, 1 or 2 of the small, quick vizcachas, rabbit-like rodents that live among the puna's rock outcrops. And perhaps, if he was patient and quiet at the right moment, a small herd of wild vicuña, the smallest and finest fleeced of the camelid family, protected now by law after nearly being hunted to disappearance in previous centuries, moving across the open grass with a particular nervous grace that no domesticated animal quite matches. By evening, he brought the herd back down toward the village's lower corrals. As he does every evening, the animals moving in their own unhurried single file along a path worn into the mountainside by so many generations of exactly this same evening, return that the path itself has become, in its own quiet way, a kind of monument. He is home now, in his own family's house, his own evening meal likely nearly finished, his own sleep tonight likely to arrive early and completely, in the particular deep, unbroken way that a full day spent entirely outdoors at altitude tends to produce. The stars, before she goes to bed, Doña Orlaya will step outside the door. As she has stepped outside this same door on most clear evenings of her adult life, and look up at this altitude with almost no artificial light for many miles in any direction, the night sky arrives with a completeness that few people anywhere else on earth ever have occasion to witness. Not simply stars, but the whole pale, continuous river of the Milky Way arched directly overhead, bright enough on the clearest nights to cast a very faint shadow. The old Andean skywatchers, whose careful, patient observations predate any written astronomy in this hemisphere, read this same sky not primarily by the bright points of individual stars, but by the dark shapes between them, the dust lanes of the Milky Way itself forming, to a practiced eye, the outlines of a llama, a fox, a toad, a serpent, each one rising and setting across the agricultural year in a sequence that this region's farmers once used, and in some villages still use, to time the planting of each specific crop with a precision that modern instruments have only recently learned to properly appreciate. The Southern Cross stands where it always stands this time of year, low toward the horizon, the particular dense cluster known here as the Pleiades, Quolca, in Quechua, meaning something like storehouse, rises in its own season. Its visibility or apparent faintness in a given year once used, and in places still used, as a rough forecast of the coming season's rainfall. Doña Orlaya does not consciously consult any of this anymore in any deliberate way, but some deep, accumulated, half-conscious portion of her still receives the sky each clear evening as something more than simple decoration, as a continuous, patient, ancient text that this whole region has been quietly reading for longer than any specific memory can precisely account for. She stands a moment. She breathes the thin, cold, clean air. She goes back inside. The spring, below the lowest terrace, where the land folds into a small shaded hollow. A spring rises from the mountainside, not large, simply a steady, quiet welling of water from between two mossy stones. Feeding from there, the stone-lined channel that Fortunato cleared this afternoon. and that carries, eventually, a portion of its flow all the way down to the communal tap in the plaza. This spring has never, in any living memory, run dry, not even in the driest years. Its water drawn, ultimately, from the snowfields of the Guardian Mountain far above, filtered slowly down through many hundreds of meters of porous volcanic and sedimentary rock before finally emerging here, cold and clear and faintly mineral, in this one particular fold of the hillside. The village's relationship to this spring is not casual. Water at this altitude, on this particular mountainside, is never something to be taken for granted, and the careful, communal management of it, whose terrace receives the channel's flow on which day, whose turn it is to clear the silt, how much may be diverted for the animals against how much must continue on toward the households further down, is governed by an unwritten but very precisely understood set of customs that every adult in the village carries without needing to consult any document. In their own memory, Doña Orlaya was taught this system by her own mother, exactly as her mother was taught it by hers. The rotation and its logic passed down entirely by practice and by patient correction of a child's early mistakes. In the same way that so much of what sustains this village has always been passed down, tonight the spring simply continues its quiet welling, unseen in the dark, doing what it has done every night for as long as the mountain above it has held its snow, asking nothing of anyone, giving everything it has to give, reading the sky before going in for the night. Doña Orlaya had already looked, as she does most evenings, toward the eastern ridge, where a particular quality of haze has been gathering. These past 2 evenings, in a way she recognizes without needing to consciously analyze it. Rain in a day, perhaps 2. Not the old, entirely reliable pattern her own mother once read with such confidence. Fortunato is right that the rains arrive with less certainty now than they used to. The old signs sometimes contradicting each other in ways they rarely used to. But the haze on the eastern ridge is still, in Doña Orlaya's considerable experience, more reliable than not, and she has already mentioned it to Fortunato, who will, in the coming day, cover the more vulnerable of the drying corn and secure the loose end of the roof's tin sheeting on the windward side. This is not treated in the village as an alarming piece of news. Rain arrives and departs here on its own extended schedule, exactly as it always has, and the appropriate response to its coming has never been anxiety so much as simple, unhurried preparation. The same modest, practical readiness for whatever the season brings that this whole community has practiced in one form or another since the very first terrace was cut into this mountainside. Doña Orlaya will close her own shutters a little more firmly tonight than she might on a clearer evening. She will check tomorrow that the small drainage channel beside her own front step is clear of the accumulated dust of the dry weeks. Beyond that, she is not especially concerned. The The mountain has always, eventually, told her what she needs to know, and it will very likely go on doing so. Whatever small adjustments its own moods may make across the years still ahead. A moment to breathe. Before we go any further into the evening, let's pause here together for just a moment. Notice, if you can, how your body feels right now. Perhaps a little heavier than when we began. Perhaps your breathing has already slowed, just slightly, without your really trying to make it happen. That's exactly right. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. Take one more slow breath in and let it go, slowly, completely. If your mind has wandered anywhere else tonight, to tomorrow, to something unfinished, to some small worry that doesn't want to quite let go, that's all right. That's completely normal. Just notice it gently, without judgment, and let it drift past, the way a leaf drifts past on the surface of a slow-moving stream. You don't have to follow it. You don't have to hold on to it. You can simply let it continue on its way, out of sight, while you stay here, warm and heavy and resting. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. There is nothing else you need to do. Just this mountain, just this house, just this steady, patient, unhurried evening. Let's continue. The house 18 night. The hearth is banked now. Its eucalyptus coals settled beneath a covering of ash, giving off their last quiet warmth into the cooling kitchen. The radio is off, the hueno finished. The photograph is on its shelf. The half-finished weaving is folded for the night over the arm of the loom. The garden is dark beyond the shuttered window. The potato rows and the quinoa and the closed blue lupins invisible, present only in Doña Orlaya's own thorough, decades-deep knowledge of exactly what grows where. The wind continues to move down from the high pastures. It will continue through the night, through the morning, through every subsequent day and night, for as long as this particular fold of mountain holds this particular village, which is to say, for longer than any span of time that feels meaningful to calculate. The wind has been moving down from these same high slopes since long before this house stood here, long before any Inca terrace was first cut into this mountainside, long before any Spanish colonial road first found its way up into these particular valleys. The wind was here before all of that. It will remain here after. Doña Orlaya sleeps in the small back room where she was born, in the bed where she spent her married life, in the house that has held her family across at least 5 documented generations, and very likely more. The mountain holds the village. The wind holds the mountain. You are drifting. You are still in this house, in a sense, or somewhere very like it. The kitchen's warmth still present. The eucalyptus smoke still threading gently through the low rafters. The sound of the wind arriving from the high puna, as it has arrived for longer than any human story here can account for. Doña Orlaya is sleeping in her small room. The photograph is on its shelf. The half-finished weaving rests on the loom. Its stepped diamond pattern of mountains waiting patiently for tomorrow's few more rows. The alpacas stand together in the dark of the corral. The village's lights, few and scattered, are going out one by one down the lane. The wind keeps its steady, patient motion. All of it here, all of it holding you. Your breathing has slowed to match the wind's own unhurried rhythm. The long, soft arrival of each gust down from the high slopes, the pause, and then the next, and then the next, a rhythm so steady and so patient that it functions for anyone who allows themselves to receive it as something very close to a lullaby for the entire nervous system. This is what a mountain village offers, if you allow yourself to receive it, even only in imagination, even only for this one quiet stretch before your own sleep arrives. The particular piece of a place that has been itself, continuously and completely, for longer than any single life could measure. The reassurance of a person who has lived in one place long enough to know it, and to be known by it in a way that makes the place and the person, after enough years, almost indistinguishable from each other. The steady watch of mountains that do not need anything from you, that are simply there, patient and enormous and entirely reliable, standing where they have always stood, holding the thin cold air and the terraced fields and the small scattered lights of the village below them, exactly as they always have. You do not need to go anywhere tonight. You are already exactly where you need to be. Simply rest. The wind will keep its rhythm. The house will keep its warmth. The mountain will keep its watch. The later hours, somewhere past midnight, the village settles into its deepest quiet. The last dog has stopped barking. The last kitchen light, a neighbor 2 houses down, keeping a late vigil over a sick lamb, has gone dark. The temperature has dropped further still. The particular hard, dry cold of high altitude at night. A cold that will, before dawn, put a thin skin of frost across the lowest terraces, the same frost that is shaped across thousands of years, which crops this region learned to grow, and which it learned to leave to lower ground. The stream below the village continues its small, constant sound, fed by the snowmelt of the guardian peak above, running down through the same stone channels that have directed it, terrace to terrace, field to field, since long before any of the current villagers' grandparents were born. An owl somewhere on the slope above the corral calls once, a soft, low sound, and is answered, or not answered, by nothing in particular. The Milky Way has turned, very slowly, overhead. The llama and the fox, and the toad of the old sky reader's dark constellations, shifting their position by degrees, too small to notice within any single hour, but unmistakable across a whole night's patient watching. Nothing here is in any hurry. Nothing here has ever needed to be. The last things, the house rests in darkness, its hearth cooling slowly behind its banked coals. The photograph is on its shelf. The weaving rests on the loom. The garden is dark. The potato rows and the quinoa and the closed lupins invisible beneath a thin gathering frost. Doña Orlaya is sleeping. The wind arrives from the high Puna, steady and unhurried, as it has arrived every night of her life, as it arrived every night of her mother's life and her grandmother's life, and every generation before that, back to whichever first family cut the first terrace into this particular mountainside. The village's lights are out now, house by house. The alpacas stand quiet in their corral. The guinea pigs have settled into their own soft, sleeping stillness near the cooling hearth. The old sacristan's church bell will not ring again until morning. The guardian mountain stands where it has always stood, its high snowfields pale, even in the deep dark, feeding, drop by patient drop. The stream that will still be running when this whole village wakes. The wind is everywhere. The house is dark. The hearth's coals glow softly beneath their ash. The photograph is on its shelf. Two young faces on a wedding day. Pleased with something. Still pleased. The half-finished weaving rests on the loom, waiting for tomorrow's few more rows. The garden is dark and still. The potato rose sleeping under a thin frost. The quinoa standing quiet. Doña Orlaya is sleeping in the room where she was born, in the house her family has held for 5 generations, and very likely more. The corral is quiet, the alpacas at rest. The village is sleeping, house by house, light by light. The mountain stands above it all, snow pale even in the dark, watching as it has always watched. The wind moves down from the high Puna, as it has always moved, as it will always move. You are held tonight too, by this same patient, ancient, arriving wind, by the warmth of a house that has held a family across 5 generations, by the knowledge that some places simply are what they are, completely, continuously, without needing to be anything else. You are safe. You are warm. You are held in the house, in the village, high in the folded mountains. The wind will keep moving all through the night, and you can simply rest. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well, sleep deeply. Good night, and